buying a business from a broker a good idea? Should you do it? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over the pros and cons to help you avoid a potential absolute train wreck of a nightmare. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, Bushy Beard Greg back with another video, and today I want to go over the pros and cons of buying a business from a broker. Now, I'm going to start off with the list of pros, end it on cons, because of course we love negative news at the end of everything, and then I am going to tell you which one is better. Should you buy a business from a broker or should you go privately? And yes, I will talk a bit about how you can go about and buy an income generating business through a private method, and why that might even be better depending on your situation, your experience, and your skill sets. Let's dive into the pros first. So there's a ton of pros. There's a huge list of pros of why you might want to consider buying a business from an actual business broker. Now, when I say business broker, I'm just taking it for granted that any broker you're looking at must be a reputable source. There are unreputable brokers which could levy the risk, could enlarge the risk of you buying a bad deal. So you want to make sure whoever you're dealing with, if you do decide to go with a broker, including us, that you do due diligence before you actually transact with them. Do they have reviews? Have they sold the type of businesses you want to buy? All that kind of stuff. What are their customers saying? Now, keep in mind, any good business is going to have naysayers. There's going to be someone who's like,
I bought this business and Google did this update. It's all their fault. It's all Empire Flipper's fault, right?
That's going to happen. You're going to see those 1-star reviews. And on the flip side, you're going to see 5-star reviews that are just people who are super fanatical about the brand. And while the brands love to present those reviews, usually the best kind of reviews to see if your broker is reputable is going to be the 3-star and 4-star, where people had probably a positive experience with a bit of constructive feedback. So you want to look for things like that. You can actually see our Trustpilot page and see all 3 examples of those if you like. So the first pro I want to talk about when using a broker really comes down to vetting. So a lot of brokers don't necessarily have an entire department dedicated to vetting like how we do. We've sectioned that completely off, where we have a fully staffed team whose only job is to vet businesses. But every broker, whether they have that or not, are going to do some sort of vetting because they want to make sure it's a real legitimate business. Because for brokers, the repeat customer is usually not the seller, it's usually the buyer. It's harder to get the seller, so most of us usually focus our marketing on getting sellers, but buyers tend to be the people who buy over and over again, versus when a seller sells, it usually takes them a year, 2 years, sometimes even longer before they've built up anything that is sellable again. It just takes time when you're building something from scratch, right? So with us, with vetting, we reject 91% of businesses that come to us. And this is great news for you as a buyer, because that means 91% of the junk is already gone from the marketplace. Now, you could be looking at marketplaces that are uncurated. And in this case, you won't get this advantage because uncurated marketplaces simply don't care. No one is looking at those businesses. No one even cares if they're legitimate a lot of the times. So you want to be very careful if you're going to use a brokerage/marketplace such as us. You want it to be a curated marketplace to really save you a lot of time. Otherwise, very much buyer beware, right? Now, the other thing that comes with this vetting process to make sure something is legitimate and is making money, doing as the owner says it's doing, is the concept of valuations. Now, if you're brand new to buying a business, this is probably something you don't know a lot about. Like maybe it is, maybe you read a lot of blog posts, hopefully ours, right? But you probably aren't like wicked experienced with it, right? So when it comes to valuations, using a broker is extremely helpful because a broker will usually talk a seller down from what we call having emotional equity. Emotional equity is where a seller who it's usually the first business they've ever sold, usually first business they've ever built, they have a strong emotional connection to what they have done because this business has done amazing things for them in life, right? It helped them travel the world, quit their jobs, spend more time with their family, all that kind of stuff. So they're going to give their business a much higher value than what it's actually worth, all because of this emotional equity. Now, that emotional equity in no way translates to an actual P&L, revenue, EBITDA valuation, right? They're unconnected. So with that said, when you use a broker, you are looking at someone who's already made sure that the seller is understands what their business is worth and what the private market is most likely willing to pay for it, right? What what buyers are willing to spend on this, what is reasonable, what is realistic. Good brokers are not, even though their fiduciary responsibility is with the seller to get them the most amount of money possible, they're not doing that at the expense of buyers. We still want buyers to get good deals. We do want the seller to also get good deal, right? Because this is life-changing capital for them. It can change their entire trajectory in life when they sell this business. Likewise, it can change your entire trajectory when you go and buy their business. And what we're looking for is that equilibrium. Now, there's problems with this. With the equilibrium, we're trying to get the seller a good deal, but we're also trying to get the buyer a good deal. That sometimes creates a friction. I will talk more about how that plays out when we go into talking about how to buy a business privately. The other big thing when you buy a business from a broker that's reputable is the advisement you're going to get, the advice from people in the trenches. Because remember, you most likely aren't buying a business every day, every week, or even every month. Probably not even every 6 months, right? Most people don't do that. If you're an aggregator, even them funded with hundreds of millions of dollars are not buying businesses every single week. Sometimes they are for like a short sprint, but it's very rare that they can keep up that kind of momentum, even with that heavy amount of cash flow, right? So with that said, this is a sort of highlight event for you, right? Something you don't do very often. Now, when you go with a broker, we have an entire M&A team, for example, and other brokers would have this too, but we have it as well. And that team can help advise you on the correct path to go down. Like if you're a brand new buyer, brand new to the online business space, maybe you're looking at buying Amazon FBA businesses because you've heard about all this like crazy stuff you can do with it, right? But you don't know anything about it, right? You've never done it. You never built your own. Well, we can help you through that process, right? We have things what we call a criteria discovery call, first to identify, what's your budget, what's your working capital? Because sometimes people are like, oh, I have $400,000 to spend. Well, you shouldn't be looking at a $400,000 business. You should probably be going down because you want to save some of that budget for working capital, right? When if something goes wrong with the business you just bought and you have absolutely zero capital to help you get out, that's a bad situation. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen to you, right? So these criteria discovery calls, you'll get what we call a buy box, a buy criteria box of what kind of businesses would make sense for your budget, the time, the skills, and more importantly, one thing that a lot of people never even think about is what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish by buying this business? And I know it's probably to make money, right? Like obviously, right? Why would you be buying a profitable business other than to make money? But why do you want to make the money, right? Like what's the reasoning? Because money is just a path to get you somewhere. And if your path is like, hey, I want to go work 4 hours a week on the beaches of Bali, you might not want to buy this business over here that's technically within your budget and skill sets, but is exploding and is going to be a lot more hands-on for you to ride that rocket ship, right? You might want something that is in a more quiet, probably boring niche that doesn't see a lot of innovation, and there's not a lot of challenges when it comes to maintaining the business, if that's your goal, right? So this is another thing we can help advise you on when you come to these criteria calls. Now, moving further down the funnel, let's say you find a business that you really like, that has a lot of potential, a lot of different things that you can see that you can do and apply and grow the business. Fantastic. The next step that a broker can help you with here is actually negotiating on your behalf. Now, like I said earlier, our fiduciary responsibility is to the seller. We want to make sure the seller gets paid the best possible price. Our commission comes from that, but we also understand that we want our incentives are aligned with the buyers as well into giving them a good deal, because buyers are repeat customer of ours. I mean, from an ethical standpoint, we would never want to oversell you, but also from just a business acumen standpoint, it doesn't make sense for a broker to hype up a buyer to buy a dumpster fire, right? We want you to buy a quality business at a good, reasonable price for both parties. Now, with that said, we can help you negotiate down if you have reasonable claims for why that sales price should be lower than what we have listed, or we can help you come up with deal structures. So this is another thing that an M&A advisor like us can help you with. A lot of people think it's a pure cash transaction, and a lot of times it is, right? Depending on the price of the business, it's like, especially like sub 100K is almost always going to be a cash deal. But as you get bigger and bigger, there are other terms, other deal structures you can do that can actually help you mitigate capital loss. And this is all part of the negotiations phase, which we would be advising you on. And the big advantage you have as the buyer using a broker in this situation, like versus say buying a business privately, is like, we know the seller, right? We did their profit and loss statement. We built it up. We've been talking to them. We understand why they want to sell the business, like what kind of goal they're trying to get to, right? So we understand where the seller is coming from. So we can help advise you so both parties get to an agreeable middle point where both goals are met, the buyer's goals and the seller's goals, and everyone hopefully walks away with what I like to say, a win-win-win. Now here's a tedious one, but an extremely important one. If you're like me and you're more creative, vision, a big idea kind of guy and not big on the details, then this is probably for you. One of the big benefits of using a reputable broker is legal protection. We have a team of lawyers that are extremely experienced when it comes to all types of transactions, whether it's a small content site, a giant FBA business, or a 7-figure, 8-figure DTC commerce store, or even a SaaS business, right? We've even sold iPhone apps. Our lawyers have seen it all. So when it comes to your APAs, your asset purchase agreements, the actual agreement that says, yes, this business is yours now, we can help you write that up. Now, I would advise that maybe you get some outside counsel too. Don't just and that's not just with us, but with any broker you go with, you probably should get some outside counsel. But if you don't want to do that, you can also just trust our lawyers. They've done fantastic work for both our buyers and our sell side. And in fact, they've done so good that some of our customers actually use them for deals outside of us now. So that's a pretty glowing recommendation there. So we can help you figure out all that kind of stuff. And when it comes to actually managing the migration, which arguably is even more tedious than the legalese part of the transaction, because the legalese is usually less paperwork than buying a car, to be honest, severely less paperwork than buying a house. So when it comes to migrating a business, and that's the process of actually not legally handing the business over to you, but physically handing the business over to you, a broker can be huge. Now there's a caveat here. Most brokers, even the really reputable ones, will not actually help you do this. They will not help you migrate the business over to you. They leave that up to the seller and buyer to figure out, and they just take their money and they're basically vamoose. And that's okay, because the reason why most brokers don't want to do that isn't because they're trying to screw you over, it's because of the liability issues. There is a lot of risk that comes with being liable for making sure a business transfer goes well. We do it. We're one of the only brokerages that actually does this. And we've migrated some very complex businesses. I'm looking at you, Amazon FBA, especially Amazon FBA Europe. But we have done pretty much everything underneath the sun when it comes to transferring digital assets over. And we have an entire team, just like we do with vetting, just like we do with our advisors, that are just dedicated to helping you in this process. And though it's a very tedious, sometimes very slow moving process, even when everything is going well, this is the most important part, because this doesn't happen, this fails, then everything else leading up to this point, your due diligence, all the negotiations, all the aspirations you put into this business are for naught. You want to make sure it transfers successfully. And one other note on this that you get specifically as a buyer, at least at EF, at Empire Flippers you get, is if the business isn't performing as advertised, say it's 50% or less of what was advertised for his monthly net profit that is earning, that's technically able to be a reversal within a 2-week period without you losing any money. Now, some people are cool with less than that, some people are not, but that is a protection. Our sellers absolutely hate that, but buyers, for obvious reasons, love it. And if you're a seller and you're one of the people who hate that policy, just remember, you got nothing to fear if you're selling a quality business. It's 2 weeks, your business tanked in 2 weeks. There's a lot of bigger issues going on, whether it's the quality of the business or a Google algorithm update, right? Or something like that, Amazon update. So this is another protection you get with using a broker. Now, there are a lot more pros and benefits of using a broker. The knowledge in general is huge. You want to go and, some people would, but a lot of people wouldn't go and start doing Amazon DSP ads by themselves. They would go and hire an agency that has wicked amounts of knowledge about the platform, right? And there's no difference between say, a marketing agency that's super specialized in a specific type of marketing you're trying to do that you don't know very well versus hiring a broker. Because just like buying a profitable business, you might not know as much as you like. And a broker can act kind of like that agency as a trusted confidant that has your back, that will help you make the right decision. Now, obviously things can still go wrong. I'm not saying that things are picture perfect or smooth all the time. Things go wrong all the time in business. Business is hard, right? People fail. And even when the transaction is done, you got to remember, you got to run the business. We helped you get that far, but you ultimately are the owner of the destiny of that asset, right? So let's talk about some of the cons, the big negatives, the boo-boos, the ouch of using a broker. The first one is kind of what I was saying earlier, legal protection. Because remember, we don't serve you. Our fiduciary responsibility is to the seller. Now, it makes most business sense for us to be able to bring you both together on amicable terms that benefits both of you ideally. But we may side with the seller on certain things. And this is, again, why I would recommend, especially in bigger transactions, say $500,000 and up, that maybe you get some legal counsel of your own to make sure everything is still in the way that you want it to be done, because legalese can be complicated, right? It often doesn't sound like normal English, it's like an alien language. But this is what I mean. It goes both ways, right? So if you use another broker, if you use us, just remember that sometimes the legal contract is going to be benefiting the seller more than you. Now, ideally, that might be okay, actually, that it benefits the seller more than you. It's a very situational thing based off of the deal structure you're doing. But ideally, you want it to be on an equal playing field as much as possible, where both the seller and the buyer, you, have some advantages baked into that contract for your situation. All right, now let me throw some flack at my fellow brokers, because this is like the biggest con I think of using a broker, and that is there is a lot of smoke and mirrors in this industry. There's a lot of brokers who will hype up sellers like, oh, we'll give you the moon in terms of your valuation. And then they come over to us like, well, they said they're going to give us this price. We're like, oh yeah, that's like an unrealistic price. Of course, they want to get you in that 6 months exclusivity. And likewise, there are things done to buyers that are not so great too. So you want to make sure when you are looking at a broker, you look at all the services that they offer. Are they doing vetting? Are they doing migrations? Are they helping with the sales process? And how is that set up? Because you see, most brokers, they're set up kind of like a real estate firm. Like if you look at a Prudential or a Keller Williams agency, each broker is almost like they're mini entrepreneur in of themselves. They're doing everything themselves. You know, at EF, we're very different from that. We have broken away from one broker to like helping you go from A to Z, which has a ton of flaws, and building an assembly line where there is one department for each section of the transaction. And because we did it that way, you tend to get a much more systematic experience when you work with us, versus if you work over at, broker X, the first experience might be fantastic, and then you work with a second broker over there and it's completely different. Everything is different. Like, what? We didn't do this last time? That's because we don't really have any SOPs. Everyone's just kind of freewheeling and seeing, what they can do, right? Like what it makes sense. And the other issue with that is when a broker does everything is like people aren't good at everything, right? They tend to be good at a few different things. Maybe they're really good at vetting. They really understand how to build that proper P&L, which is great from a buyer perspective and a seller perspective. Or maybe they're super good at negotiations, doing hard sells, or like reaching out to people. They understand who to reach out to at any given time. Or maybe they're very professional at marketing the business to get those leads to come and to like show you sellers or all that kind of stuff, right? Or maybe they're super pro at migrations and they spin around the block a few times with Mr. Bezos when it comes to migrating an FBA business, right? So they can help you navigate through any challenges. But it is rare where a broker who is doing everything is good at everything. And now multiply doing everything by however many deals that they're doing, right? And if you're saying, well, my broker gives me white glove treatment where I am his only client, well, I hope you're a multiple 7-figure business or 8-figure business, because if you're a $100,000 business, what does that say about the broker that you're his only client? That's not great. So some people give us hate because of the assembly line approach, but I can tell you from personal experience talking with private equity family offices and with aggregators that raise hundreds of millions of dollars, in general, we tend to be their favorite broker because of that assembly line process. So these are some of the cons that you're going to go through. And the other big con, and we're about to talk about this, is something that you can really only do when buying a business privately. And that is you're going to pay a market value price, a fair market value price for the business. You're not going to get this extremely insane deal where you bought, a business that is worth, say $800,000 for 200 grand. It's very, very unlikely. You can't find those deals with brokers because brokers know what things are valued at. So if you want to find those insane deals, you really have to go to the off market, to the private market, right? Now, what you can find with brokers is businesses that are declining. And some people might say, well, why would you ever sell a business that is declining? Well, it's very obvious, right? Like one, buyers buy them. And two, a buyer that buys a business that's declining, that has something wrong with it, that they know how to fix, they're basically buying that business at a discount because they go fix that problem and say that business should be at the 500K level, but is valued at 200K because of the reality of the net profit. They fix that problem and suddenly they just added $300,000 of equity and now the business is back on track growing. So they actually got a stellar deal. So there are ways you can get stellar deals with a broker, but typically if you're shopping with a broker, what you're really wanting to make sure of is not be too concerned with the price as long as it's reasonable, but be more concerned with the quality of the business because the quality should be higher. That's why you're paying that extra price, because you don't have to worry about the scams, about the lemons, about the dumpster fire businesses usually, right? Now, not saying that they can't happen. Every broker lets those slip through no matter how good they are. So it's still up to you at the end of the day to do due diligence. So let's talk about when it is better to buy privately. And you probably already know. So one of the big things about buying privately is you can get a great deal, right? If you broker that business yourself, you can find sellers that honestly don't know what they're worth because most people don't. Entrepreneurs, as smart and as visionary and as creative as they are, they tend to not understand how their own business is valued. They are either way overpriced or sometimes way underpriced, which is more rare. Usually they start at overpriced. But if you're able to trample through that and get their emotional equity out of the way, you actually run into a very interesting thing where they will go from being overpriced to being way underpriced from what we would sell it at, from what a broker would sell it at. So you can get that 500K deal for pennies on the dollar, basically, by doing this. Now, this is basically playing on the naivety of the market. Some people don't like that, but business is business, I guess, in that sense. This is why I always tell sellers to always use a broker. But if you want to find great deals that are just smoking hot discounts, private is the way to go. Now, when it comes to being buying privately, you got to be careful on several fronts. Like the main advantage of you doing private is technically the sales price. Like that's the reason to do it. Otherwise, just use a broker because we save you so much time. So when you go privately, you need to be careful. Like you need to become what we are, right? You need to do vetting. You need to look at the P&L. You need to get legal counsel. You need to do all the things, right? Otherwise, you can put yourself in a very, very crappy situation, which we don't want, right? I like whether you go privately or use a broker, it would be like, it's the worst possible thing whenever I hear a story of an acquisition nightmare that could have easily been avoided just by setting up some of these common systems. Now, if you get an accountant, like say you're buying e-commerce stores privately, get an accountant that understands e-commerce, get a marketing agency that understands e-commerce, get a lawyer that understands e-commerce. Don't hire your brother-in-law who does like divorce attorney. He's a divorce attorney, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. Yes, he's a lawyer, but in a very like worlds apart, different kind of legal stuff, right? You want someone that knows what you're doing and you can pay them a nominal fee to audit all these things. Very common in the private equity M&A space. I've been through these kind of meetings before where they audit your, like say like your Google Analytics or your traffic or your PPC on Amazon and all that kind of stuff, right? So surround yourself with a team you can trust to help you audit these businesses. If you are going to go the private route, your best bet is to try to recreate what Empire Flippers already does to make sure you are as safe as possible. So which one is better, private or buying a business from a broker? Obviously, buying a business from a broker. Hello, I work at EF. very biased. Subscribe for more videos on commercials. But in all seriousness, it really depends on your situation. I think if you are an absolute brand new buyer, you should be buying from a broker 100%. There's just too many pitfalls for you starting out that it doesn't make sense for you to hunt good deals. It's very similar to buying a real estate house, a rental in real estate, right? Like, yes, as a brand new investor, you could totally go buy that house on the floodplain that needs to be completely gutted and winter is coming and there's no winterization on the pipes or anything like that. All this chaos that is happening, right? And the deal sounds amazing until you have to actually do the work you just spent potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on, right? So when you're first starting out, I always recommend to use a broker. Yes, you're not going to get the screaming deals, but you're going to be much safer and you're going to buy a business that has scalable income. You're going to be able to become your own economy slowly but surely using a broker. And by slowly, it's actually quite fast. I've seen people who have become millionaires buying businesses from us just once a year over a 3-4 year period. So it can happen in a very condensed time frame with a broker versus, say, real estate or whatever. Now, when it comes to privately, yes, you're going to get those great deals, but you will also have those extra risks. So I would only recommend going to buy privately when you have a few things set up. One, you have the risk appetite and the capital willing to lose, because there's a higher chance of losing your capital going with the private deal. Two, that you have already set up that team I mentioned. And three, you have bought at least one business in the business model of your type from a broker. If you're all about content sites, buy one from a broker. If you're all about Amazon FBA, buy one from a broker. Understand the process in and out, because once you understand that, you're going to be in a much better position, because going privately, especially in this market right now where so many people are wanting to buy assets, is pretty difficult to build deal flow. You're going to have to invest a lot into marketing. Just for an example, we are often willing to pay upwards of $5,000 to even $15,000 for one business. On our marketplace. Are you willing to do the same, to dish out that kind of money just to get a deal to look at? Because most deals, then you're going to have a similar experience, are not going to be worth your time. So you need to have some good quality filters. So to recap, if you're looking to buy a business fast, brokers make 100% the easiest transaction. There's so much value there. If you're looking to buy heavily discounted deals that you can get amazing offers through, but it takes a ton of work, if you have that kind of gumption to go after that, then private can make a lot of sense. And what I see is most common is people tend to start off with brokers like us, and as they start building up their portfolio of assets, then they start going more and more into the private market because they understand what they're doing. But they never truly leave the brokerage. They're always looking for a good deal that comes out from the brokerage, because why wouldn't they? You pay pretty much nothing when you use a broker. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe and leave a comment down below on what you thought of this video. Talk to you soon. Bye.